The fluvoxamine study is really, really interesting. The first thing that I would like to say is that there is no long-term effect of this drug on nest building behavior. I interpret that there's many OCD patients that will not respond to to fluvoxamine and reduce their symptoms. So fluvoxamine is only effective for a small subset of OCD patients. So maybe our mice represent that group or resemble that type of OCD patients. However, it's more complicated than that because the acute effect, so this is a long-term study. The animals were exposed to fluvoxamine for 14 to 18 days, and that's a long-term study. But the nesting was only affected during the first hour after injection and not any time after that. So it's a short-term effect, but no long-term effect. So that's a complication. In addition, it was only the HA1 strains that dose-dependently decreased their nesting in the first hour after injection, but not the HA3 lines. So I'm just going to flip through some of these figures here to remind me. All right, so marble bearing was dose-dependent for both of the strains. With increased doses of fluvoxamine, they dug less and buried less marbles. Now, this is a short-term effect again, but it's different among the strains. So the HA1 strain responded for nesting as well as marble bearing. The HA3 strain only responded with marble bearing. For the open field test, generally negative results, and only the 10 milligram per kilogram dose increased the time that the animals spent in the central square. So it did have a little bit of an anxiolytic effect, but very little. And then let me just go back to the data that you collected on the elevated plus maze. And I'm just going through the course site here just to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing and I remember it correctly. All right, so for the effects of the elevated plus maze, this again was really unexpected. I had no idea what data to expect here. The first thing is really interesting that at the vehicle injection, subcutaneous injection in the flank, in the vehicle, you can see that the HA3 mice are much more anxious than the HA1 line, although they were similar, showed similar anxiety-like behaviors in the open field. So here we have another separation of the animals in their associated characteristics. So in the elevated plus maze, and maybe this is related to fear of heights in people, I don't know, I'm just making this up right now. But this is really interesting that the baseline difference in anxiety-like behavior in the elevated plus maze is very dramatic between the replicate compulsive-like strains. Now, and then of course the response was very different as well. Whereas the HA3 strain increased their time on the open arm with increased concentration of fluvoxamine, the HA1 mice actually decreased or had a trend. It was not significant, but had a trend to decrease it a lot at the 10 milligram per kilogram dose, but then gradually build up again at the 40 milligram per kilogram. So again, it shows that the two replicate compulsive-like strains are a little different. They probably have a little bit of a different set of genes, a different genetic background that affects some of these other behaviors a little differently. Again, very similar in what we see in humans who have a large variety in symptoms that are either associated or not associated with OCD. So I think, again, this is data that strengthens our model and doesn't weaken it, but strengthens it. The effects of the drug are actually considered to be construct No, predictive validity, sorry. Predictive validity. So if you use a fluvoxamine in people, in some OCD patients, it will reduce the symptoms. We have seen that in the first hour for nesting, and also for marble bearing in the first hour after 1 hour of injection of the drug. So that provides predictive validity to the model. All right, so let me know what you think of this interpretation.